This is Talking Ears. My name is Frank Wardinger.
My name is Juan Vasquez.
And I'm really excited because this is the third installment of the Updates in Music Audiology workshop from the National Hearing Conservation Association Conference 2025. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, they were featuring Laura Sinnott and Colleen Laprelle, and you're going to be hearing a couple references back to those talks during this episode because they happened right on the same day.
We are very excited to have our next speakers, Dr. Shannon Switzer, who is the director of the Musicians Clinic at Sensaphonics, and Dr. Michael Santucci, head of Sensaphonics in Chicago.
I asked what Michael and Shannon wanted to speak about during the conference, and they immediately said, the safe use of in-ear monitors. Makes sense. This is the primary thrust behind their work over at Sensaphonics.
Likewise, and it was even more exciting that they were both able to speak at this workshop, and even more so, it is the 40th anniversary of Sensaphonics.
Speaking of anniversaries, it's almost the 50th anniversary of the National Hearing Conservation Association, and we were there to witness an historic event, which was Michael Santucci accepted the Lifetime Achievement Award. This is an award that's only been given out 5 times total. Michael's is the 5th during that entire almost 50 years history. What a time to be part of the community, to be able to be there with him, sharing the joys, sharing some of the tears, and sharing that moment.
It was a very special moment, and we're delighted to be able to share it with all of you.
My name is Dr. Michael Santucci. I am an audiologist that has discovered how to work with musicians. I started it back in 1985, so this is my 40th year working with musicians. Dr. Switzer is now running the clinic at Sensaphonics, and we see a couple thousand musicians a year. We've probably seen over 30 or 40,000 musicians over those 40 years. So it's been quite a lot of exposure. This is what we're going to do: a brief history of monitoring and in-ear monitors, bad listening habits using in-ear monitors, which is pervasive, some key points and questions, and of course there are disclaimers because both Shannon and I work at Sensaphonics, and there'll be products on my talk and her talk that are Sensaphonics products. So we're just letting you know we have a commercial interest in what we do as well. So let's talk about a history of monitoring. What is monitoring for people on, it's the music industry's way of listening to live or recorded music through a speaker or headphone or an ear monitor. So it's a system that allows you to hear what you're doing. The purpose, well, it helps musicians hear themselves, right? So Laura went through all this with the Beatles. I'll talk a little bit about it. It helps them adjust their mix, because when we talk about mix, it's the things you want in there. When I look at in-ear monitors, you'd think that they're going to listen to like your CD player, and you're hearing the whole song, and then you hear yourself singing over it. What do they want? Me, 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 and maybe somebody for pitch and somebody for rhythm, and I don't want to hear anybody else. So it's a choice that you can make, and it allows them to mix and improve their performance. To mix sound in a concert, we're talking bigger concerts because small clubs usually do not have a monitor engineer and a front of house engineer, but for the audience, it's the front of house monitoring system. You're all familiar with these things. The guy sitting in the middle of the audience, so where you can hear and get a good soundscape of what's going on in the concert, and he's mixing those speakers for the audience, not the band, because the band's standing behind those speakers. So they're just getting rumble. It's really more interference for them than not. So there's lots of people they have to reinforce for, and they tend to get loud. And this is what Laura was talking about earlier. How loud can we make it without hurting people? The front of house, the stage, the floor wedge was invented because the Beatles, as we heard before, struggled at Shea Stadium. What they used to do is put their vocal mics and mixes into their guitar amps. And that's how they heard themselves. I had vocals and my guitar coming out, and somebody else is over here. When you get in front of 100,000 people, you're not going to be able to hear anything. The thing about floor monitors, What you'd like to do is put a speaker in front of you. That's what the Beatles decided we needed to do, except now it's blocking the view. So if you notice, these floor monitors are kind of pointed up from your feet. Not really a very good line of sight to your ears, right? But this is what they do so you can hear things. They're highly directional. So if you move away from it, you better have another one, or else you won't hear it. So what you'll see, like the Rolling Stones, when I was working the big shows with them on these massive stadiums, they had over 120 monitors on stage, creating a lot of sound level for the band. In fact, the bass player told me that he'd lose balance sometimes, it got so loud. So that's what floor monitors can do. We get to the in-ear monitors, and they were invented about the mid-'80s. I would say in the late 80s is when it really came commercial. So there was a company called Sonics that came up with a radio and earpieces, and that was in about 1989. And then my company came up with ear monitors in 92. So that's the beginning. And in those days, it wasn't popular. It was a few bands. I worked with the Grateful Dead. There was Steve Miller, Reba McEntire. There was a handful that found these to be useful, but it wasn't mainstream for anybody. Now you can see them on pretty much any club band. You'll see people using them. They thought it was a fad. When I started, everybody kept saying, this is just a fad. It'll go away. They'll go back to speakers, but it's growing, and it's still growing. It's been growing for 30 years, so it's not going away. There are a number of them on the market, and there is over 250 models for universal fit. And then the customs, a little bit less than that, where there's a bunch of companies making them though. It used to be 2. Now there's, how many, 30? So the cost ranges, you can get them as low as the earpieces themselves, $100 from Shure. You still need a belt pack, and we're going to talk about that next and how you get the sound to your ears. So traditional in-ear monitors, it's got 3 pieces to the puzzle there. One is the earphones, obviously, that you're putting in your head. The next, wireless body pack. What's that doing? Well, instead of running a cable on the floor to a floor monitor, they get rid of the floor monitors, and they send, believe it or not, a stereo FM signal transmitted from over to the right. You'll see the monitor engineer sitting there, my friend Ian Kuhn, mixing for Dave Matthews. So the monitor group is mixing for the band. They don't know what's going on in front of house. In fact, the band could have a horrible experience on stage with in-ears, and the crowd will say it was the greatest show I've ever heard, and vice versa. So it's a separate system, and it's run by a separate engineer sitting on the side, and his job is to know how people want to hear things. So really good sound engineers are always in demand because they know how to interpret what you want, and everybody wants something different. It's usually more me. So that's what you get from that. There's bad listening habits when using these, lots of them. And in fact, it's kind of interesting. We have a questionnaire, it's 2 pages, medical history and musical history. And one of the questions is always, do you wear hearing protection? Yes. What type? Ear monitors. Oh, nice. Why are they saying that? Because every ear monitor company, because it has the potential to save hearing, make it that if you're wearing ear monitors, you're safe. So I always say to them, how loud are you turning them? I don't think too loud. Oh, well, then they must be safe if you don't think so. So you have to be careful of what you're doing. Traditional ear monitors, the benefits, and this is why everybody likes them. You get a personal sound mix for everybody on stage. Now you don't have to say, turn me up louder because this guy's too loud for me. Now you can just mix your own stuff. You don't have to worry about anybody else on stage. There is improved pitch perception, right? And timing. Think about a band on a big stage like the Rolling Stones. The drummer and the bass player are like 100 feet apart. And there's some time delay going on. So now everything's coming in real time, or all receiving it at the same time. Ear monitors were invented not for hearing, they were invented for vocals. Because what was happening is the bands were getting louder. They couldn't turn up the Wedgmore because of something we all know, feedback. So what would the singer do? Oversing. I can't turn it up, but I still can't hear myself. So they're ruining their voice. So it was actually designed to keep the vocalists from losing their voice. That's how it started. Lower sound levels on stage because you're supposed to get rid of all the speakers, although that doesn't happen. Lower does not mean quiet. There's a drummer. Drummers are loud, and it'd be boring without them. So you always have a drum kit, and there's very few that do electronic. Reduce feedback, because now the mics and the speakers are separated, and you don't have to worry about the feedback issue anymore. Lower sound for the audience. Why is that? Because we got rid of all this stage sound. I went to work with the band Korn. Anybody know who they are? Metal band. And the engineer who works with Mellencamp with me, and really good engineer, I walked into the room. It was a giant barn, and it was so loud. And he's working the front of house. And I said to him, geez, could you just turn the front of house down? He goes, it's not on yet. That's stage volume. So in the audience, we're getting over 100 dB from the stage. And then he has to mix over it because that doesn't sound good. That's why those speakers are out in front. So lower sound levels when you get rid of all that stuff. Increase mobility, you can walk around. Taylor Swift can put her belt pack on and run into the audience and do all that without losing any audio recognition or quality. And then increased isolation from surrounding sound levels, obviously. And one that's not on here, the possibility to reduce the potential to reduce hearing injury. Potential. All right. The limitations. Well, they feel too disconnected. Now we put on a 30 dB isolating mold, and they look out in the crowd and they see a fishbowl. They're in a fishbowl, they all say. I see mouths open, I don't hear anything coming at me. The audience is muffled or gone completely. The bandmates between songs are going, what? And that's a problem. And then their own instrument, too, doesn't always get in the way. So there's potential to injure hearing if misused. Does that make sense? Turning up levels too high is one of the bad habits, and we see it all the time. Also, only wearing one earphone is another bad habit, and Shannon's going to be talking about that later. In-ear monitors, as you can see, do not mean hearing protection. The factors really for safe listening are two main things. One is how much sound is being blocked out from the things that have been interfering with you on the floor monitors. So if they block out the maximum, you're not ever having to turn up louder because things are leaking through. So isolation is a key. And then your brain, taking the time to train your brain as a musician to turn it down. You want to counsel patients properly. When you see people in our clinic, when they come in, they get the history. We give them a full motivational lecture on how the ear works, how they get injured, why it happens, to have them understand. And a lot of them say, I just want the molds. How many of you just take molds? Oh, nobody, look at that. They just won't admit it. But I just want the molds. I don't want the tests. And I go, well, you got to have the test. And no, you're taking the time to come in here and you're going to put an earplug or something in your ear that might compromise your music. Why? Because you're concerned about your hearing. Why wouldn't you want a hearing test? So we want to counsel them, get them to understand how important their hearing is. And when I finish, they always go, I'm so glad you made me stay. I learned so much. Because teaching them is a big part of this. We'll talk about that poor fit and excessive drivers that make it more difficult to use. The first ear monitor had one round diaphragm dynamic driver like a Sony earbud or Apple earbud. IEMs that cause musicians to turn up louder are because they don't isolate. So most of the products, in fact all of them besides ours, are made in acrylic. Stick your finger in your ear and move your jaw, and you can feel how much movement's going on. If you have a piece of plastic in there, that is painful. And especially when you're supposed to go beyond the second bend of the ear to get the maximum isolation. What they do with acrylics is they cut the diameter of the ear canal down. Sometimes they shorten it to a stub. So what you would think is, well, I've got this big, huge thing in my ear. It's only 10 dB of isolation. And they don't know that. So silicone maintains a proper seal when you move your jaw, and it's comfortable to be deep in your ear for long periods. The driver wars are like the loudness wars Laura was talking about. Dual driver came out. I had a single driver ear monitor first. And then people would say, when I turn up the bass, that single driver distorts. So I added a bass speaker with a passive crossover. So now you can turn up the bass and hear well. Now, there's one company now has 21 speakers per earpiece. So excessive drivers really means the more drivers, it's like having a car and adding a bigger engine and a bigger engine and a bigger engine. Doesn't mean you're going to speed, but it's sure likely you're going to speed, right? And not even without knowing it. Auditory memory, this is an important study, right? And this is one thing that really freaked me out because I was part of this in that I provided the silicone earpieces for the study. And I was so excited to get the results because this instruction was, turn your floor monitors to what you like. And I have a probe, we'll talk about the probe mic measurement in the ear, and it'll tell you how loud you're listening. We'll record how much it is because we're taking a measurement right at the eardrum. Now put on these isolating ear monitors that block out 30 dB and turn those up. Well, you can see the difference. It's 0.8 dB from all the trials. This is something that just tells you that if you've been playing guitar, what do? You play guitar. What did you learn? Beating it into your head. Pitch, timbre, all these things. All these audio needy things that you have to use. And you learned loudness too. So if you've been playing 100 dB at your guitar, you put on your ear monitors and you turn it to familiar. And everybody did. It's pretty amazing. The second part of this study, we said, turn that floor monitor down. We'll go down in 1 dB steps. And when you can't hear it anymore, you can't feel like you could perform, stop us. So you see that was about 1.8 dB. They could go down. They couldn't even go down 2 dB without saying, I can't hear enough. Ear monitors, the average was 6, but we had people down at 10, 12 dB saying, wow, it sounds good here. And so I tell them, if you just train your brain to listen at this level for a couple of weeks or a month, this will become your new normal. And loud will be too loud for you instead of what you're used to. Lack of education is the big problem. I have people telling me musicians don't care about their hearing, they could just turn it down. I always say there's a drummer on stage. You can't. You have to be louder than the drummer. You need a +6. You guys understand that? You need a +6 signal to noise ratio. So if the stage is 100, you got to be 106 before you feel like you're hearing yourself well enough. They're not taught about safe use. They just get impressions. There's companies that say, just go get impressions, don't get a hearing test. Tell them not to get a hearing test. Whatever reason that is, I don't know, but it's pretty amazing. What do we do about it? Well, there is a number of things. We do have a Gold Circle master class from Sensaphonics that actually teaches in detail. It's almost 5 hours. We target the audio professional and the audiologist. We want everybody to be on board. There's conferences. The Audio Engineering Society, I started a technical committee. Here's audio engineering. We have a technical committee on microphone diaphragms, on loudspeakers like Adam Hill's group, and headphones. There's one on spatial audio, one on all these audios. So I come into the room and I said, I'd like to start a new technical committee at AES. And what would that be? I go, hearing and hearing loss prevention. And I'm sure it was a reflex, but the guy goes, and why would our members be interested? When I stood up, I go, I think I'm in the wrong room. I thought this was audio engineering. Not everybody cares about mic diaphragms or car audio in your group, but they should all care about their hearing because they're designing for the rest of us. So we started having these conferences. We just had our 4th one in Copenhagen in May. Was it May? June, the end of May. And it's pretty incredible because we get about half and half, 30 or 40 audiologists or researchers in audiology, and then audio engineers, researchers, and practitioners. And we get together and try to exchange ideas on how to get this going. The World Health Organization and their Make Listening Safe initiative has also brought this to people's faces a little bit more in the audience than the bands, but it's a good thing. So here's how I measured. There's 2 ways to measure. I don't know if this piece is still available. Meade Killian helped me get started in my business. If you don't know Meade Killian from Metamotic Research, He invented the filtered earplug. I was a beta tester. And then I wanted to do in-ear monitors. He helped me. And then I said, I don't know how to tell people how loud to turn them. And so we had this probe mic system that has a diffuse field inverse, meaning, everything's taken on the collar. So when we're measuring at the eardrum, we're getting all this interference artifact from ear canal resonance. So there's a switch you can hit to kind of take an average ear canal resonance. So you're getting close to dBAs outside their ear. It was cool, but here's the problem. You get to the show, a lot of times the mold was so tight, the tube got pinched a lot, so you were having problems with that. And the other thing is, there was, we got a late load in, the bus broke down. All these things, you show up at the venue, the singer doesn't feel like doing it today, and you don't know. So you had to be there to do it. So let's talk about dB check. This is a solution. The dB check is an inline analyzer that tells you how loud your headphones or ear monitors are. It takes drive voltage from whatever you're plugged into, it's a patented device, and it turns into dBA. So you can see how much it is. Now, I wanted to start with dose. In the first band I did this on years ago, they were at 100% dose in about 15 minutes. I'm like, okay, you guys are already at 100%, and they're all high-fiving each other. I'm like, no, that's bad. So I'm thinking, we got to give them something more practical. So what we do is we convert dBA to minutes allowed. Measuring them, we're predicting levels based on this, but we go by the manufacturer's published specs. I was working with Will Calhoun, drummer for Living Colour. It was 94 in his ear and 107 outside his head. So this is a way that you can actually see what you're doing and turning down. So it used to be just Sensaphonics and it was proprietary, but now I just want to protect everybody. So we put all my competitor companies that make earphones and ear monitors, and there's more to come. We can keep adding. And it allows you to choose your time. How much time do you want to measure? The view, whether you want to look at the microphone in the room or just the ear monitors or both together, and you select your model. And by the way, I want to explain NIOSH and OSHA and the reason I chose to do both. It is extremely difficult for big touring bands to get and meet the NIOSH standard. It's just hard to do that, So I also believe that music and noise are not the same. Even though your ears can't tell the difference, they really aren't. And I believe there should be a music standard rather than what we're using. Because remember, this is not something you're doing for 40 hours a week for 40 years with the same machine making the same noise all day long. That's a chunk. Your nerve cells are being stimulated by a bunch of different notes. Musicians don't do 40 hours a week. They do a few hours a week, right? And they play really a lot louder than industry. So I give them a choice because it's still choice. Here's a NIOSH if you're really worried. And I have people that they're going to do NIOSH, whatever it takes, because they have hyperacusis or whatever. But then there's the OSHA, which gives them a lot more latitude. And of course, what we always recommend is check your hearing every year. That's the most important. That's how you'll know if it works.
I also don't have a great singing voice today from a NAMM show a couple of weeks ago. And also I can't sing. So bad listening habit number 2 is only wearing one earphone. It's really common for musicians to pull out an ear because they feel too disconnected from the audience, like we talked about earlier, and it's a very risky behavior. And I hate to say it, but now that I've alerted you to this, you're going to see it absolutely everywhere, even people who are seasoned professionals in the industry. The reason that this is such a risky behavior is because when you pull out an earphone, you lose binaural summation. So binaural summation is when you listen to equal inputs in your ears, your brain synthesizes the sound levels to increase your perception of the loudness without having to turn up your pack. And when you pull an ear out, you lose binaural summation. So in order to achieve the same desired sound level, up goes the in-ear monitor. We often see asymmetric hearing injury in musicians who wear one in-ear monitor. Injury tends to be worse in the monitor ear. And of course, in addition to hearing loss, we're trying to avoid a number of music-induced hearing disorders as well, especially because this batch of symptoms and disorders tends to be what actually drives people out of the industry beyond just hearing loss. So how do we get people to stop pulling out an ear? add ambience into their mix. That's what they want to hear, and we can give it to them in a safe way. So there are a few effective and safe ways to do this, and there is at least one really risky way to do this. So one option is to place ambient mics on the stage and add it into the musicians in-ear monitor mix. Do not put a vent in an in-ear monitor. I'm going to get back to that in a minute, but a lot of the times when we're training new audiologists to the music industry, when we say, what should you do if a musician is pulling one out because they feel isolated, they say, vent it. No. And do use in-ear monitors with ambient mics embedded on the earphones themselves so they can have true localization and blend that ambient sound with their monitor mix. Do place ambient mics on the stage. You can place it directly on the stage and point it at the audience. Sometimes they'll put it up in the rafters and collect the ambient sound from above the crowd. But this is a really fairly easy and simple way to add ambience into the monitor mix. And it's nice because it gives musicians a sense of the audience, the energy, things that make playing live music feel really fun. But one of the limitations is that this doesn't provide any localization. So no matter where the musician looks, they kind of have this feeling like the audience is stuck right in the center of their head. Do not add a vent to an in-ear monitor. So there is significant overlap between audiology and pro audio, but we have to make sure we don't conflate every single concept. So venting helps with the occlusion effect for hearing aids, but we do not want to vent an in-ear monitor and let ambient sound through and compromise the isolation, because like we talked about earlier, isolation is everything with getting the listening levels lower. And then proceed with caution when shopping around and recommending in-ear monitors. Starting to see at least one company who's put a pressure valve into the in-ear monitor. Part of educating audiologists is to work with the music industry is to teach you all how to be critical thinkers when new pro audio tools come out. So every in-ear monitor company needs to have an edge. It's like any industry. We all have to have something shiny and new to sell the new model. And so this is something that's cropped up. So if you have to fit something like this, for whatever reason, make sure you educate the musician on safe use and preferably get them a dB check so they can measure their actual levels. And then finally, do select an in-ear monitor with an ambient microphone on board. So you can see the ambient mics. There's two models that do this right now. One is from JH Audio and one is from us at Sensaphonics. And you can see in the green circle, in addition to the custom in-ear monitor, there's an ambient mic embedded on it. And so this is actually giving musicians true localization of their soundscape and with directionality. And so the J. Harvey model is a little bit high place on the earphone. So they have partial localization. They get a sense of where the sound is coming from. But with our model, we embed it in a way that it mimics the open ear response. So in other words, if they're only listening through the ambient microphone, they feel like they don't even have anything in their ears. And then I just briefly want to talk about the app. So something that's really special about the 3DME, in addition to letting musicians hear their ambient environment, we also give them a great deal of control over the functioning of the ambient mics themselves, including setting the mic levels, manipulating 7 bands of EQ, further customizing the in-ears on the third page, including a cross feature. So if you have a musician with unilateral hearing loss or music-induced hearing impairment, we can route the sound from the ambient mic. Well, I forget that we're not at AES. You guys know how cross works. But it gives them more of a stereo sound in their remaining listening ear, which can be hugely beneficial and keep musicians in the industry. And then the final thing that I'll mention is we also have musicians using this as active hearing protection. So rather than getting a mix and blending the ambient sound, they're just listening to the ambient sound and taking the mic levels down. I know Laura's working with a number of orchestral musicians, myself included, who are using this in this capacity. We can use the ambient mics to also continue to reduce listening levels because it can be used as management for musicians with hearing impairment or music-induced hearing disorders. The controls in the app can change the ambient mics only, or there's a toggle where adjustments change both the ambient mics and the monitor mix. So for some reason, if a musician's not happy with their mix from their sound engineer, or perhaps they're mixing their own ears because they're just getting started, rather than having to do an app on an iPad and the ambient mic app, they can connect them so the ambient mic app does both together. Same thing, unilateral noise notch. Rather than turning up the mix higher to hear that frequency range, we can just increase those frequencies and keep the mix down. And then tinnitus, speaking of sense of control, we can give musicians with tinnitus options to shape sound if they'd like around their tinnitus. And then things like hyperacusis, dysacusis, you can really choose your own adventure in terms of using the app as a tool. Key points. In-ear monitors have the potential to help music industry professionals listen at lower, safer levels compared to wedged monitors. However, they are not hearing protection devices. Musicians often use in-ears in ways that threaten their hearing health, such as turning their levels too high and or pulling out one earphone to hear ambient sound. High listening levels can be prevented by properly educating musicians about safe listening, including taking sound level measurements of the listener's in-ears. Pulling out one earphone is risky. We can add ambient sound into the mix via stage mics or active ambient mics embedded on the earphones. Please do not vent an in-ear monitor and really proceed with caution with a pressure valve in-ear monitor. And then, like Dr. Santucci said, annual hearing testing and specialized counseling are huge, huge pieces of providing holistic hearing healthcare to musicians, especially musicians who are using in-ear monitors, regardless of what the manufacturer tells you to do. They say, charge them X dollars, take the ear mold impressions, use a bite block, ship them to us. My advice is to, and whatever your impression fee is, roll in your time for a hearing test and offer one fee and just do both. You can set your own rates when you're doing this with musicians. And if you have questions, you can always contact us. We're always happy to support you. Like Dr. Santucci said, it really takes a village to protect this industry, and we are happy to help. Thank you.
Talking Ears is a production of Earmark Hearing Conservation. The theme music is by Scott Hallam. You can find more of his music at audiodowsing.com. The show is produced and edited by Juan Vasquez, Scott Hallam, Mary Kim, and myself. Thanks for listening.